So what's going on, guys? DIY Dan here again, and this is another mechanical video. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to do an oil change on a 2004 Nissan Exterra with a 3.3 liter V6 engine. As well as doing the oil change, I'm going to show you how to change the air filter and other things to check under the hood while you're going through this process. Here is a chapter index of what takes place in this video and at what times they happen. So if you don't need to watch the entire video, you can bypass what you don't need to see so I don't waste your time. And let's get to it. So the first thing I like to do when doing any oil change, not just on this Exterra, is remove the oil filter first. Now it's pretty common to drain the oil first. However, if you end up dropping that oil filter while you're taking it off into a full pan of hot oil, that can be really messy and dangerous. So that's why I like to remove the oil filter first. The other thing I like to do, depending on the application, is I usually get a piece of plastic or cardboard and put it down from the drain pan up to the oil filter to catch that residual oil that slips out so it doesn't get all over your steering components or frame rail, depending on the location. Now the oil filter on this Exterra is right at the front of the engine on the driver's side, and you should be able to remove it by hand. If not, you can get a filter wrench. Here's the oil filter I ended up getting. I actually got it off of Amazon if you want the part number on that. When removing the oil filter, make sure that the sealing ring did come off with the oil filter. Sometimes it will stick to the oil filter housing, and then when you go to put the new one on, you will double O-ring it. And when that happens, you will lose a severe amount of oil in a very quick time frame and could possibly damage your engine by losing oil pressure. Or even if you catch it before even leaving the garage, you're still going to make a big mess with oil all over the place. Now with an oil filter this small, you don't need to use a filter wrench to tighten it up. Just snug it up good by hand. Now we're going to go ahead and drain the oil. The drain plug will take a 14mm socket and is located right here. Right here, I'm just breaking that free and draining the oil into my drain pan. Once the oil is finished draining, go ahead and start the drain plug in by hand and thread it as far as you can. One of the common mistakes that's made is over tightening a drain plug. If you over tighten a drain plug, you can strip out or stretch the threads on the plug and the pan, which can be a costly repair. So the correct torque is like 22 to 29 foot-pounds. I don't ever use a torque wrench to tighten these down, but you'll notice I'm not using that big of a ratchet and I'm just making it good and snug. After tightening it down, I just wipe off the excess oil and we are done under the engine. The oil fill cap is on the passenger side of the engine on the valve cover. Right here, I'm just making sure my funnel's good and clean. Once again, I got my oil off of Amazon and I got Castrol high mileage 5W30 engine oil. The total volume of this 3.3 liter engine is only 3.5 quarts, but I ended up getting a 5-quart jug just because of cost. Plus, we just got this vehicle and I'm not sure if it has any oil consumption because it does have over 100,000 miles, so it's always good to have a little bit extra to keep in the garage. So I went ahead and put about 3 quarts in, then checked the dipstick real quick and then topped it off slowly since I was doing it out of a 5-quart container. Make sure you do not overfill the engine with oil. That's worse than being a little on the low side. The engine oil dipstick is on the driver's side of the engine, right next to the air tube that runs from your air filter to the intake manifold. When checking your oil, you want to pull it out once, wipe off the oil, and then put it back in to check it. Now, if you're filling it up from a 5-quart container like I did, and you're not quite sure if you're right at 3.5 quarts, go a little on the low side, get your oil reading on the dipstick, then fire your engine up, let it build oil pressure, shut it back down, and check it again. It's a lot easier to add a little oil if you're still low than it is to drain oil if you're overfilled. So right here I'm doing the final check of the engine oil level. Right here you can get a good view of the oil dipstick and where it should be. When doing your final oil level check, make sure you're getting that reading all the way around the dipstick in the same spot because it will pull some residual oil from the dipstick tube and possibly give you a false reading. The other thing I like to do is check it twice and make sure I get the exact reading both times. So now I'm going to go over how to change the air filter out. This had 4 clips that just pop up to remove the cover. However, you have to take the hose clamp off and disconnect the mass airflow sensor in order to get the air filter out. The mass airflow sensor just has a little tab that you have to push and depress it in order to remove it from the sensor. Then I went and got a 5/16 nut driver to remove the clamp that was holding the hose to the air filter housing. There is another small hose on the air filter housing, but if you're careful and just twist it up out of the way, you don't have to remove it. So here's the exact reason why I don't take my vehicle anywhere else and why I do the oil changes myself. Right here you can see that the air filter was ripped, and that happened when they were installing it last time, and that was allowing dirt to bypass the air filter and go directly into my engine. Now I don't know who the previous owner used as far as oil changes, but I wouldn't recommend going there anymore. So underneath the air filter in the housing was pretty full of leaves and crap, so I ended up putting a paper towel in the intake, and I'm just using my compressor to blow all that crap out of the box. Now before installing the new air filter and putting the housing back on, it's a good idea to look in the upper housing and make sure no dirt looks like it's been bypassing, because you might have a bad air filter housing that's allowing dirt to bypass. Besides the fact that my air filter did have a hole in it and was letting it bypass a little bit, but overall it seemed pretty clean, so I was happy about that. So I actually forgot to order an air filter when I did my Amazon order, so I ended up going to AutoZone and getting this STP filter. There's the part number right there for it. You'll notice there's a wire mesh over the top of the filter, and this makes me wonder if this was a common problem with these air filters upon install, so they reinforced it so it couldn't damage the air filter while it was being installed. So you're just going to set the new air filter into place, and then when you go to put the cover on, be careful with it, because that's how this filter got damaged previously. You'll notice as I go to hook the hose back up to the air filter housing that corner of the box gets very close to the air filter, and there's not much way around that. So just be careful and kind of lift up on the hose as you install the air filter housing in place. You really want to pay attention to everything when you're doing an air filter, because that is the quickest way to ruin an engine, is not install a housing right or puncture a hole through an air filter like was previously done. Anytime dirt gets through to that engine, you are going to destroy your rings and shorten the life of that engine. So right here, I'm just securing the clamps that hold the lid to the housing. There's 4 clips in order to do this. The 2 that are on the engine side are secured to the bottom part of the housing and snap over the lid, and then the 2 towards the outside of the fender are secured to the lid and snap down over into the lower housing. Then just snap your connector onto the mass airflow sensor. Make sure you hear that little click, that it popped on all the way and is secure. And then don't forget to tighten down your hose clamp, because that's a quick way to ruin your engine as well. And that's all there is to replacing the air filter. Now I'm just going to go over some other fluids and stuff to check under the hood. Your power steering reservoir is right behind the battery on the passenger side, and if it's too faded out to see the markings on the side, you can always just pull the lid to check your level. The master cylinder is on the driver's side on the firewall. Now once again, if it's too dulled or faded out to see the level through the side of it, you can always just pop the lid in order to check it. Unless you've got a brake fluid leak somewhere, you should never have to add fluid to this reservoir. If it is getting a little on the low side, that's a sign that you either have worn out brake pads or brake shoes, and you might need to look at those and possibly replace them. We already had discussed where to check your engine oil at, and then your windshield washer fluid bottle is up towards the front of the grill. Then your radiator cap, obviously, make sure you do not check that when it's hot, otherwise you could burn yourself. And the coolant overflow bottle is just to the left of the radiator. The overflow bottle you can check and fill at any time, whether the engine is hot or cold. Never remove the radiator cap when the engine is hot, because it will have over 200-degree pressurized coolant spitting back at you. The automatic transmission fluid check dipstick is on the passenger side towards the firewall, and is the only fluid that will be checked while the engine is running. You can check the transmission with cold oil. However, it is more accurate to check it after going for a drive and warming up the oil. But there is a mark on the transmission dipstick for cold and hot. There is also a junction box loaded with relays and fuses on the passenger fender well. One other quick side note, guys, is make sure you dispose of your used oil correctly. Any auto parts store, including Walmart, is required to take used oil back, even if you did not buy the oil or the filter from them. So make sure you dispose of it correctly. I find the easiest way for me to do this is just to keep some empty 1-gallon jugs around the house or in the garage, either from milk, or in this case, it was a windshield washer fluid bottle. I funnel it into those jugs, and then the next time I'm out running around, I just drop it off and I'm done with it. That's going to wrap it up for this video, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it and it gave you some good information. If so, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. The whole concept of my channel is to give you guys the most information in the least amount of time as possible so I don't waste your time. And I hope to see you next time. Have a good one. Later.